Hi there, smart drivers. Talking to you about social driving, the leading cause of car crashes in our society, which takes in everything else that people think causes car crashes. Speeding, distracted driving, not wearing seat belts, safety restraints, and those types of things. And I have a perfect example of a video I was working on today that demonstrates social driving and what I'm talking about in the way that people drive after they get their driver's license, and somehow they feel vindicated in the way that they're driving, that it's a battle and that we got to be right and we got to be first, and they fall into the trap of the right of way myth when they're driving. So here, I'll just show you this and see what you think, and we'll talk about it a little bit more later here in the presentation here. So essentially what happens in the video is two trucks on a two-lane highway. It goes to a choke point where it merges back into one lane. One truck is trying to pass the other truck, and the lead truck refuses to give the right of way to the other truck to let it pass, and is forced off the roadway onto the shoulder of the road. And you can see the bias with the note on the video there where it says trucker nearly pushes driver off the road during a merge. And so this is a perfect example of social driving in the way that people drive after they get their license. And it's not just car drivers, it's also truck drivers as well. And unfortunately, I'm a little bit disappointed with what's happening on the internet right now with the sheer amount of racism that's going on on social media platforms and whatnot. So, social driving, that's what we're talking about today. We showed you the video of the two rigs at the choke point on the highway, and one was trying to pass the other one, and the other one was forced off onto the shoulder of the road because simply all they had to do was slow down to allow the other vehicle the right of way. And I'm going to go first, and I'm not going to give it up under any circumstances. And as I say again and again in terms of defensive driving, that sometimes it's just a matter of letting your foot off the throttle, let them go and have their crash somewhere else, and that way you are going to stay safe on the roadways. It's like a second of your time or a couple of seconds of your time in the world in which we live, because traffic crashes are not what they are on television, okay? You do not walk away. You will always be in shock when involved in a traffic crash. A couple of good things to really have a look at in terms of what we're talking about today in terms of social driving: situational awareness and space management around your vehicle, 5 defensive driving tips and new driving tips, defensive driving tips for new drivers, ink still wet on your driver's license kind of tips for those new drivers who are just getting their driver's license and heading out onto the roadway, especially as we're coming into fall here, and very shortly we'll be into winter time. So we're going to help you with all that. All right, social driving. It is the one thing that unites us as a human race, regardless of creed, politics, religion, or any other beliefs that we have in our world. Most people on the roadway follow too close. They're at 1 second following distance, and ideally you should be at a 3 to 4 second following distance behind the vehicles in front of you, okay? In the arena of social driving, characteristic of social driving is policing other drivers on the roadway and telling them what they did wrong. And not just other drivers, but cyclists, motorcycle riders, kids on electric scooters, pedestrians, and whatnot. So they're always talking about other drivers, and I am guilty of this as well. I talk about what other drivers are doing on the roadway and whatnot. And my number one pet peeve on the roadway is slow drivers who can't even do the posted speed limit. That really drives me crazy when I'm on the roadways. Drivers too close in a queue of traffic. So when they come up to a traffic light and they're stopping at the traffic light, they're too close to the vehicle in front. Ideally, you should be 1 vehicle length back from the vehicle in front of you, and your landmark for that is being able to see the tires of the vehicle in front of you making clear contact with the road surface. Too close to vulnerable road users, and I will talk about getting excited. As I've said before, when I'm driving my car, driving the old buggy, I'm fine, I'm nice, calm, cool, and collected. But when I'm walking or I'm on my bicycle, my rage meter goes from like 0 to 100 in a nanosecond. And today we were walking home, come around the corner, and it's kind of a blind corner at the intersection in the suburb here, and this driving school car goes by, and the pedestrian and the driving instructor did not tell the student, hey, watch out for the pedestrians and maybe move over a little bit and give them some room. And this is the other thing, is that drivers are too close to vulnerable road users. Move over, create space. 3 feet, 1 meter minimum between your vehicle and pedestrians, scooters, bicycle riders on the roadway, because they are unpredictable and you could potentially hit them. Get there itis, the Titanic, 14th April 1912. It's not just car drivers, it's not just truck drivers. It has been around for a very long time to get from point A to point B as quickly as humanly possible. And this is the reason that the Titanic sank on this day, the unsinkable ship that sank on its maiden voyage. Ship captains from Southampton, England, on their journey to New York City were under immense pressure to make that crossing as quickly as possible. And where this term comes from, get there-itis, is Mayday, Mayday, which many of you may have watched with airplane crashes and the investigation around the plane crashes and why they crashed. You know, Mayday, Mayday talks about this in terms of pilots running through storms and trying to get to their destination with crew members and with passengers on board, and unfortunately have crashed because of getting there, sticking their nose in, completing the mission. Running red lights, speeding, aggression, all of these are characteristics and hallmarks of social driving. And get there-itis, getting from point A to point B, is one of the hallmarks of social driving and will undermine and erode any defensive driving skills that you have in place. Communication. We need to communicate effectively with other people on the roadway. Driving is a social activity. It's like a relationship. You have to get along with other people and you have to communicate to them. Fortunately, signals, lights, horns are blunt tools to communicate effectively with other traffic. And as Marion was talking about earlier, as she gets more and more experience with driving, she is now beginning to develop driving intuition. And with that driving intuition, she's being able to anticipate what other traffic is doing on the roadway before they signal their intent, before they communicate effectively with other drivers on the roadway. But I can tell you, as part of social driving, most people on the roadway do not communicate effectively with other traffic. And one of the theories about this is that we are nose to tail in traffic. In other words, we're looking at the bumper of the vehicle in front of it, and you can kind of think of it as standing in a line at the grocery store. Very rarely do we talk to the person in front of us because we're looking at their backside and we're not going to talk to their backside. But if you put people at the same distance that you're willing to stand behind them in a line, which is, 12 inches, 20 centimeters, and they turn around and they look at you, you're going to feel very uncomfortable if you are not talking to the person and you are standing there in their personal space. You're going to be in their space at 12 inches, 20 centimeters away from them. The issue with this is that drivers are tailgating, they're too close to the vehicles in front of them, and one vehicle brakes, the next vehicle brakes, and the next thing you know, by the time you get to the 20th vehicle behind you, the whole line of traffic comes to a stop. Misperceptions, too close in queues, you're getting rear-ended, managing space in front. Having space buys you time, time buys you options, options prevent crashes. You want to move from being reactionary and unpredictable on the roadways to responding to traffic situations. And when you respond to traffic situations, you are thinking clearly, you are not emotional, and when you respond, you have numerous options. Okay, the traffic in front of me is coming to a stop. I have enough space to slow my vehicle and stop safely. If you want to communicate effectively with other traffic on the roadway, you need 3 flashes minimum before you begin to move the vehicle, and very few drivers know how to do this effectively. 1 flash is to get the other traffic and drivers' attention. The 3rd flash is for them to do something that is going to help you out. And many new drivers, beginner drivers, come back to me and say, oh, if I put on my signal and I want to merge over, then other drivers speed up and they pass me. If drivers are speeding up and passing you, they are actually helping you out when you're driving because they're getting out of your way so that you can move over into the other lane. Signaling, it's not giving information to the enemy. This is not battle. It is not war. It is a social activity, and we need to get along with other drivers, and you need to communicate effectively so that you can be predictable on the roadway. And in the event you get tired, you're not paying attention, you're distracted by whatever is going on in the driving environment. If you're communicating effectively with other traffic, then other traffic may help you out and prevent being involved in a crash. Driving is emotional, reactionary, and retaliatory. I talked about this at the beginning of the presentation, that we as drivers and road users like to police other people. For example, the other day, we're coming through the four-way stop and there was a teenager on an electric bicycle, and they're coming through the intersection this way. They didn't even slow down at the intersection. They just looked and they blew through the intersection at probably 25 miles an hour. And I said to my daughter, because we were talking about this 2 live streams ago, in terms of the prediction that vulnerable road users' deaths and injuries are going to increase in the next 5 years on our roadways. With the increase of electric bicycles and scooters and skateboards and one wheels and all the other electric vehicles, we are going to have more crashes, because these kids are unpredictable and many of them don't have driver's license. So I was saying to my daughter, Scout, who was sitting in the seat beside me, I pointed at the person on the bicycle and I was like, there you go. I said, there's exactly why we're going to have an increase in injuries and road deaths, is because these people on electric bicycles aren't even slowing down going through intersections. And I pointed at him kind of like this out through the window, and I look in the rearview mirror and the kid has turned around on the bicycle and he's given me the finger, because he thought that's what I was doing to him, was giving him the finger as he was blowing through the stop sign at the intersection. When in fact I wasn't. I was simply pointing at him and he gave me the finger, and I was like, okay, so you're giving me the finger even though you were the one that just blew the stop sign. So there you go. There's social driving. Okay, drivers police and criticize other road users. They crowd them, they honk, they give them the finger, they engage in road rage, which can be minor incidents or major incidents on our roadways. Right of way, following too close, failing to give the right of way, mismanagement of speed and space. These are the top reasons for traffic crashes on our roadway. Following too close, okay? 3 to 4 second following distance. And yes, when I tell people that, and they're like, oh, if I do that, somebody's gonna cut in front of me. Yes, if you do, they're going to do that, and it's going to happen, but not very often, every now and again, and usually by a pickup truck driver, as has been my experience, that it's usually a pickup truck driver that jumps into that space. If they do, just take a breath, reclaim your space, get your 3 to 4 second following distance, and keep yourself safe. Failing to give the right of way. Again, it's like the 2 semi-trucks on the highway at the choke point. The one driver on the inside, all he had to do was take his foot off the throttle, let the other driver pass, because obviously the other driver had a big head of steam up and was going at a much higher rate of speed than the truck at the front. Just let off the throttle, let the other person go in front of you, and let them go and have their crash somewhere else. Manage speed, manage space, and you're adjusting your speed all the time to maintain that space around your vehicle. Good luck on your driver's test, and remember, pick the best answer, not necessarily the right answer. Elevator fan, this is someone using the center left lane as a passing lane. Center turn lanes are not passing lanes, and yes, perfect example, elevator fan, of social driving in the way that other people drive after they get their license. Paul, that is the result of intentional ignorance, and yes, it is. Marion says she's noticed that as well, and yes, it happens all the time. So when you are coming to a choke point, you're coming to a merge point on the roadway, you need to have situational awareness. Okay, the road is going to narrow. What's around me? Is somebody trying to pass me? Who's behind me? How far behind me are they? Do I need to take some sort of action? It's not just at merge points or choke points. We also need to think about, all kinds of situations on our roadway and the needs of other road users, the needs of drivers, people on scooters, kids on electric bicycles and whatnot. And how do we manage space? Because if we're not near anything, it's less likely that we're going to hit something. And as well, as I'll talk about later in analyzing that situation there caught on dash cam, is the, merely missing or turning it into some sort of disaster. It was just a matter of letting off the throttle and letting the person go and have their crash somewhere else, which is what I say again and again in terms of defensive driving. Let the person go and have his or her crash somewhere else. It's simply not worth it in terms of you getting involved in a crash and having your vehicle down for months on end, not to mention the fact that your injury or death in the event of a car crash, because it's not like it is in the Hollywood films that you're going to be all right and you're going to walk away from a car crash. You are in shock after having a car crash, even if you do walk away without injuries. your body sustains shock, and it takes weeks, months to get over that shock. So know that in terms of being involved in a car crash. Stay away from other people, because if you're not near anything, it's less likely you're going to hit something. And as well with space and managing space around your vehicle, space buys you time, time buys you options, options prevent crashes. It's the lead cause of crashes, following too close. In North America, Canada, and the United States, rear end crashes are the #1 crash, and it's because people are following too close to the vehicle in front of them. And if something happens in the driving environment, they don't have time to react. They're hoping on a wing and a prayer that they can react in time to avoid being involved in a crash. And this is the numbers, the statistics, traffic crash statistics are simply showing that they do not react in time and that they are involved in a collision. Mary and I have also noticed a lot of people passing other vehicles on double solid lines lately, and most of the time it's fatal. Yes, double solid lines, road markings are not spurious, is the word I can best come up with. They're not there to trick you. Road markings are there to help you out when you're driving and to indicate to you when you can and cannot pass safely. And double solid lines, as Marion is saying, double solid lines are places where you cannot pass along the roadway. And they're usually on hills where you cannot see. There's no clear line of sight. They're at intersections and other places where there's obstructions going around curves to the left and right and whatnot. So pay attention to the road markings. And again, this is part and parcel of your situational awareness. What are the signs along the roadway? What are the road markings on the roadway? Where are the cars in relation to your vehicle? And driving is not a hit it and quit it thing. You don't just put it on cruise and drive down the roadway and nobody else is going to get in your way and you're not going to have to adjust your speed or slow down or whatnot. You're going to have to do all of this as you're driving. You're constantly monitoring, you're constantly adjusting your speed, you're constantly reclaiming space and whatnot when you're driving. Elevator fan, is brake checking a tailgater an example of social driving? Elevator fan, absolutely, because brake checking is incredibly dangerous. And I had somebody who is working as a postie leave a comment, and they were talking about how bad drivers are on the roadway and whatnot. And no doubt, driving is getting worse. I believe that since the pandemic, people are getting more and more selfish and more angry. And as we know, driving is emotional. And as people are getting more emotional in their cars, because their cars are their second most personal space that we have next to our houses, that they're reacting on the roadways. And when drivers are brake checking other people because they're tailgating, you are putting yourself in grave danger, because the person behind you could tailgate you, or the person who is tailgating you behind can rear end you, and you sustain all kinds of soft tissue damage. Even if you do have head restraints in your vehicle, which most modern vehicles all have head restraints, and it'll stop your head from snapping back and getting whiplash, but you are still going to sustain some sort of injury in a rear end crash. So in all incidents, I cannot stress this enough, do not brake check people behind you. And what should we do if a jerk is tailgating on city roads? I thought about turning off the street and let the jerk move past me. And yes, you can do that. That's one thing to do, is to pull off the roadway in a safe place, where the other way of dealing with tailgaters is to increase the distance in front of your vehicle. And that way you have time to respond to changing traffic conditions. You don't have to resort to heavy braking and risking having that person behind you crash into you and those types of things. The other thing you can do is kind of just touch the brake and activate the brake lights. That will sometimes get them to back off as well. The other technique that I use when I am coming to a stop in a car is I will come up about half the distance that I need to bring the vehicle to a stop. I'll do about half the distance that I need to stop. I'll apply the brake, I'll release the brake, and then reapply the brake. And what that does is that flashes the brake lights. And oftentimes, I find most of the time, in fact, that the person behind me who is tailgating me will actually increase the following distance to the rear, because they don't really kind of trust you after that when you're applying and reapplying the brake pedal and you're flashing the brake lights. So try that. About half the distance as you're coming up to where you actually want to stop, about half the distance, apply the brakes, release the brakes, and then reapply the brakes again. And you'll get that flash on the brake lights, and that'll help you out in terms of reducing your chances of being involved in a rear end crash. Paul, also drivers that are impatient waiting for a red light will turn right only to make a U-turn. Yes, fortunately where I live, and in most places in Canada that I have lived, some places in the US, not so much for U-turns. However, along the eastern seaboard, Maryland, New Jersey, South Carolina, places like that, U-turns are very much part and parcel of their driving culture. I do not advocate U-turns. I think there are too many pieces involved in the maneuver, and I also believe that they are at high risk. And as well, you are putting yourself at a really unsafe angle when you are turning at intersections and doing U-turns. So I just don't advocate that at all. Actually, just, go around the block or find some place that you can turn around and whatnot. It's much, much safer. Paul, traffic lights that malfunction allow drivers to blast through the intersection without scanning the intersection as a four-way stop. Hopefully, Paul, if the traffic lights are not working at the intersection, that people do not blow through the intersection, because as you said, which is correct, if the traffic lights are not working, the intersection is to be treated as a four-way stop. So know that for the purposes of driving and keeping yourself safe after you get your license. Before proceeding through any intersection, even if there are working traffic lights, be sure that you scan the intersection thoroughly, left, center, right, left again, because for those of us that drive on the right side of the road, it's going to be the left side where the traffic is going to be coming from if you're involved in a T-bone crash at an intersection. Connor, yo Rick, how are you? Worked to the bone because it's Tuesday. Blue days is what I like to call it, but always be safe on the roadway and don't speed. No speeding tickets. Yeah, don't get speeding tickets for sure. Mary and I have realized that I can read the vehicles around me and sense that they are going to change lanes or turn, and I give them space. And yes, and what you're beginning to create or develop, Marion, is you're beginning to create a driving intuition. You're beginning to understand movements of vehicles, change in speed, slight movements, and you're beginning to notice all of that. And in doing that, you're able to interpret what the driver of the other vehicle is going to do. Most vehicles, for example, what you're saying in terms of changing lanes or whatnot, that they're moving the vehicle slightly before they change lanes. There's always a little bit of an adjustment there, and you're going, oh, wait a minute, that vehicle just moved to the left or whatnot, and they're going to change lanes. So it's part of driving intuition where you can unconsciously determine what other vehicles are on the roadway. And this is one of the keys to situational awareness, a higher level of its situational awareness, and having better defensive driving on the roadways. Evan, if a dog isn't on a leash or you're following someone, be prepared to slow down. The same thing applies there as a child not holding hands. If there are hazards ahead, expect people to react. And yes, and what Evan is talking about is pedestrians and other road users. We were talking about this last week. One of the things that mystifies me about traffic in Western Canada is bicycles and people on electric scooters riding into traffic on bicycle lanes. It just baffles my mind why they're doing this, but they're doing it. And you're looking far down the road, you're checking both shoulders of the roadway, checking pedestrians. What are pedestrians doing? Are they walking a dog? Is the dog on a leash? Did it get away from the person? Are there children with moms? Are they hanging on to the hands of their parents and those types of things? Are they getting away and whatnot? All of this is going to help you stay safe when you're driving. And it's all part and parcel of what we're talking about today in terms of social driving, in terms of situational awareness and keeping yourself safe when you are on the roadways. You cannot drive the way that everybody else drives on the roadway. And unfortunately, too many new drivers come back to me and say, well, this isn't the way that you're going to drive after you get your license. And so why do I have to do it for a driver's license? The reason you have to do it for a driver's license is because if you continue to practice those skills that you learn for the purposes of your driver's test, you are going to stay safe on the roadway, because they teach you to stop back one vehicle length in traffic. They teach you to maintain a 3 to 4 second following distance when you're driving. They teach you to communicate effectively. They teach you to scan intersections before proceeding through intersections to ensure that traffic at the intersection is stopped. And scanning and observing is one of the skills that you need for a higher level of situational awareness. And as you gain more experience, it's going to give you that driving intuition that Marion is now talking about in terms of being able to know what other drivers are going to be doing on the roadway. Because the other piece about driving is it's a little bit like 3D Tetris, right? Where do you fit in the different arrangement of vehicles on the roadway? And the other piece about this is that different things happen at different times. And you can have a driving situation that 9 times out of 10, nothing is going to happen. But at one time, something slightly different is going to happen when you're driving, and it is going to lead to a crash. This is what makes driving so challenging. 9 times out of 10, I will drive out of the back into the alleyway or back into the alleyway and there's nobody there. 1 time out of 10, it is the same thing with driving. You can drive through the same intersection 100 times and nothing will happen. 1 time you drive through that intersection, somebody will run the red light and you will be involved in a crash. This is why you need to thoroughly scan intersections and develop the skills and habits that will keep you safe, because those skills and driving habits are going to kick in when you're tired, when you're distracted, when something happens in the driving environment that you didn't anticipate. So if you can continue to have that 3 to 4 second following distance when you're driving, stopping back 1 vehicle length in traffic, and scanning intersections before you're moving through, all this is going to increase your ability to drive safely. So today we're talking about social driving, the way that people drive after they get their license, situational awareness, and driving intuition for the purposes of defensive driving, keeping yourself safe on the roadways and other people on the roadways. So think about social driving when you're driving, defensive driving, keep your space in front, stop back 1 vehicle length in traffic. All that is going to make you a safer, smarter driver. And remember, pick the best answer, not necessarily the right answer. Have a great day.